And Bill just made a decision, right or wrong, but he just made a decision that his daughters were probably not going to succeed to the management position of the company. And he also looked at this as an opportunity to get them some liquidity. And he looked at my three sons as his three sons. He loved my boys, and he knew that I wanted my three sons to succeed to management of the company. So we were working on that plan, and we were making some real progress. I remember the last meeting we had down in Florida, and I was really kind of excited about it, and so was Bill. And then on August 1st, 2001, my oldest son and I were driving to work, and my cell phone rang, and it was Sloan's HR manager. And he said, "Chuck?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Bill Sloan, not Bill, he said, Bill just had a massive heart attack." And I said, "Bill who?" I could not believe, because Bill was 60 at the time. He says, "Bill Sloan." I said, "My God." And so he told me where he was. I drove to the hospital, and he was gone. So, when you talk about these plans and, all the great planning and how the strategizing and everything, sometimes it's like a war. After the first shot, there's confusion. Same thing here. There's always these things that are going to change the equation. So here's Bill and I, who were right in the middle of this planning process. It was going to be an orderly transition. His daughters were going to get liquidity, and my sons would, wind up with an ownership opportunity to run the company, and that was just in a nanosecond was gone. On top of that was the fact that here's Corinne, his wife, and his two daughters. They have no income. We were not paying dividends. The total money that Bill and I were getting out of the company was coming out through compensation. His compensation was gone. And so Ted and I are back to the drawing boards. Here we are going back to the next strategy of how to handle the ownership of Sloan Valve Company. And I have to give Corinne and her attorney a great deal of credit, because in one of the first meetings that we sat down, Corinne looked at Ted and I and she said, "Bill told me that Sloan Valve Company should always be a privately owned company." And she says, "I'm going to make sure that my attorney knows that." That was huge. You have to realize that she just as easily could have gone to the marketplace and put 50% of Sloan Valve Company into the open market, but she didn't do that. So we started working on a plan to redeem Corinne's stock and the stock of her two daughters. And one of the things, again, that we said at the beginning amongst ourselves, that we want to be fair with Corinne, and we want to be respectful to Bill's memory, to the contribution that he had made to the growth of the company. This was not about us. This was not about stealing the business from Corinne at some, cheap price. This was not about exclusion. It was about involvement. The two son-in-laws by this time, one is our plant manager and the other one is our rep in Chicago. So again, we embraced them. We pulled them in and made them part of our team. And of course, Corinne even today sits on our board of directors. So then, what did that do? That transitioned ownership of Sloan Valve Company from the Sloan Allens to just the Allens. But it's interesting, I didn't mention this point, the transition really kind of started in 1969 when my oldest son was born. And I wish I could look smart, but it really wasn't that brilliant a move. I started transitioning stock to him, not for an estate planning purpose, but for his education. At that time, we were paying a dividend. So I thought, geez, if I just pass the stock on to him, he can pay for his own education at a lower tax rate. And then my next two sons came on, I just kept that process going of giving stock to my kids. I can tell you many times during that process, I had advice from attorneys: "Stop it, you've done enough, And I said, what are you worried about? They said, well, you just don't know how this can all turn. And I said, listen, if they turn on me, then I didn't raise them right. And they said, that's not always the issue. It's the in-laws, it's the attorneys, it's the father-in-laws, all these other exogenous factors that come into play. And I would just have to say that, I just kept giving, and I kept getting that advice. And it's interesting, by the time we got to this particular point in the story, in the company's history, where it was 100% Sloan, it was 100% Sloan in the next generation. At that point, I had no stock in the company. So we had to sit down together now. We really had put the ownership issue behind us. We had time to look at some new things. One of the things we did at that time is we established an office of the president, and my 3 sons run Sloan Valve Company from the office of the president. They are the president and the CEO. Just an interesting story. How did that happen? I remember, here we are, we just kind of passed Bill Sloan's death, and my oldest son and I are driving to work, and he looked at me, he said, Dad, he said, what if I do if that happens to you? And I said, well, you call a meeting of the board of directors and you elect yourself president. And he didn't say anything. But the next day he got in the car, he says, you remember our phone conversation yesterday? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, I've been thinking a lot about it. And he said, I don't think that's fair. He said that I would get that opportunity just because I'm the oldest son. He said, I'm blessed. He says, I got 2 brothers who, he says, are smarter than I am. And he said, they should have the same opportunity. Do you have any ideas? And I said, well, I've heard about office of the president. I said, you don't hear about it in public companies, but it's something that you see in private companies. So, why don't you go to work and see whether you could put together an office of the president, including your 2 brothers. And that's really what he did. So it really, that idea and concept came from my sons. So here we are. I am now chairman of the board, and my 3 sons are CEO and president operating the company. And the question again now is, what is the future of the company in good hands? I think it really is. I'm blessed, but they took that step to establish the office of the president. That was their decision. I think that was excellent. The next thing they said to me was, Dad, you've got 20 people reporting to you. We can't operate that way. And, that kind of grew like Topsy, You hire this guy, and you're always kind of worried about, well, if I elevate this guy, somebody else is going to be ticked off. So here, I got this line in this company, people reporting to me. And if you walk into that, rat's nest, you wouldn't want it either. So Kirk and Jim and Graham decided that they wanted to establish a VP organization that didn't exist. These people were called directors. They were not VPs. And I would just have to say, in transition, they were not always all that high on, the members of that team. So they wanted to put their own team in place. They thought if they just came in and kind of assumed, this team, that they wouldn't be able to put their fingerprint on the company. So we then put 6 VPs in place. We have 3 operating and 3 support. And each one of my sons has 2 of these VPs reporting to them. So, very important structure here, and it's working very well. As I told you, became the executive chairman. The term executive, I'm not sure what that means, except I pretty much can do what I want. Sometimes chairman just means that you come in and run the board of directors meetings. I come to work every day. As a matter of fact, I'm probably there 6 days a week. My wife has had some health problems, and she's in Arizona, so I got a lot of time on my hands. And I sometimes find myself the first person in the morning, the last person to leave at night. They, from a product point of view, they've made some very important decisions. They've taken Sloan Valve Company into the ceramic fixture business. I've talked about this valve that you recognize as a Sloan flush valve. That usually goes on a ceramic fixture, whether that's a toilet or a urinal or now a ceramic sink. And if you look at the name on those ceramic products, it's usually Kohler, American Standard, Gerber, Toto, that kind of thing. And we have a lot of leverage in that marketplace. We have a very, very strong brand, and often people will look at the valve as controlling the performance of that product. So we are now in the fixture business. We are not manufacturing it ourselves. We get that product basically from China, some from Mexico. And I would just say that almost everybody now gets their product from offshore. I think there's only 2 pottery plants left in the United States. There's just an awful lot of handwork that goes into a fixture. So from a supply chain point of view, we're on an equal footing with the major people in the industry. Our focus is strictly in the commercial marketplace. We only make white, and we're looking to get buildings like this, not your home, not in color, not in different shapes and sizes. That was a decision that my sons made. Another important decision that they made was that we are the leader in what's called sustainability or green or LEED in the plumbing marketplace. And that was something that could only come from somebody of that generation. A grayhead like me really didn't see that sustainability issue as quickly as they did. One of my middle son just stepped in and said, "Dad, we've got to start saving water with our products. Not only saving water with our products, but we have to start running this plant in an efficient manner. We have to be good custodians for the environment." And Sloan Valve Company, I would say now, is number one, and my second son is number one in the industry. He has talked in Beijing and all around the United States on sustainability and green construction, and then there's this, as I say, there's something in the construction industry called LEED, which is building buildings that conserve energy. Another thing they did, which was really an interesting thing, is we re-engineered every process in our business. You have these little processes that you run your business. The biggest one in our business is order to cash. We get an order in, it's got to be processed through the order department. It's got to go through the manufacturing cycle. It's got to be shipped. It's got to be billed. You got to collect the cash. That's order to cash. And as you can see, I'm drawing that line through the business this way, because here you've got the sales department, here you got the operations department, here you got the credit department. And so this process cuts through all these departments. All of us, including myself, went to Boston. There was a professor there, and we all learned process re-engineering, and we have totally re-engineered the processes of our company. And I just tell you that just to let you know that I think that Sloan Valve Company is in excellent hands. You get to an end of a talk like this, and in YPO, Young Presidents and World Presidents, the final thing is always, well, what's the take-home value? What did I learn from this that I can take home and implement? Well, I'd have to say that, first of all, this is a story of Sloan Valve Company, and I don't think there's anything that that we have done that you can just rubber stamp into your own business. I think one of the things that's been said is that you have to be constantly re-evaluating your position and making sure that your strategy is relevant to what's going on in your business. Here are just some of the things that hit me, though. I think owners have to decide early what their long-term plan is for ownership. As I said in the very beginning, if you wait till the end, honest to God, if you wait till you're 50 years old to make that decision, if you want to pass it on to your next generation, you've lost the opportunity to do a lot of planning and gifting and things like that you could have done at an earlier age. I think another important thing is to separate compensation from control. A lot of people, you'll see older guys saying, "Jesus, I can't sell this business. That's where that's how I pay for my style of living. I get compensation from the company, or I get dividends from the company. And if I give up that control, I'll give up that compensation." And that just isn't a fact. I think you got to separate those two. You got to look at compensation, or how you're going to take money out of the business, even if it's a partial redemption, or like Bill was talking about, or whatever. You got to separate these things. Otherwise, you're going to just kind of hang on to it, and you're going to wind up taking your life's work and giving 50% of it to Uncle Sam, and I just think that's ridiculous. I want to say, of course, that ownership is not an answer for everybody, and I think you've got to analyze these things in the perspective of your own personal interests and in the perspective of your business. I mean, every business has got a life cycle, and if you don't see a long-term opportunity for your business, boy, pick a time when you can sell it and optimize your return. Another thing is you got to be blessed in that next generation with capable people to carry on. God has blessed my life. I have 3 sons that I think the world of, and I'd have to say are highly respected within the business. But if that wasn't the case, I wouldn't pass on this valuable asset to them just to wreck it. One of the things that I often think of is Sloan Valve Company employs 1,200 to 1,300 people. Those are 1,200 to 1,300 families out there that depend upon Sloan Valve Company to put food on their table. And it just would be distressing to think that that would be in jeopardy. Like all of you who are in a position to hire and fire, in the small time, anytime you have to terminate somebody, it's very distressing, when you have to ask somebody to leave your business because you know that there's somebody who's going home that night and sitting down at their dinner table that night and saying, geez, honey, I lost my job today, and we're going to have to tighten the belt. Well, how would you like to do that to 1,200 to 1,300 people? I also think it's important in all these transactions to treat people fairly. I don't know why, but some people get a kick out of screwing the other person they're dealing with. Maybe that's just part of our adversarial buy-sell relationship. But in these businesses, family businesses, you're going to wind up living, with either your children or you're going to be living with other relations. And if you don't treat people fairly, I think that that's going to be a burden for you for the rest of your life. I think you got to, all the time that you're focusing on this succession of ownership, you also have to run a profitable business. As I told you, our business did 2 things during my career. We grew the business by 350%, and secondly, I took my ownership from 9% to 100%. That took a lot of dollars, and the only way that could be paid for was to have a profitable business and run a profitable business. So you got to take care of the store if you're gonna do that. Another thing is that vision forward. As I told you, the second generation at Sloan Valve Company kind of had this vision backward of optimizing, the products and the services and the businesses that was founded by W.E. Sloan, and that just happens. That's logical. But you have to, if you want your business to grow and be successful, you got to make sure that you're constantly looking forward. And I've often thought that's what W.E. Sloan would have said. Don't look back at what I did. He never looked back. He always was looking forward, and you've got to do the same. The other thing is you got to put together a team. You got to have a group of advisors. Most of us are operators. Whatever our business is, we operate a business, and we know our customers, and we know our products, and we know our services. And when it comes to some of these issues of ownership and the strategy to put these things together, call on a professional. That's what I did with Ted. I wouldn't be standing here today if I had tried to do this by myself. Just don't do it by yourself. Again, going back to my YPO days, we go to cocktail parties and these guys are talking about buying and selling their businesses and everything else, and everybody's trying to look like a big shot. I'm telling you, get good advice from good people. And this is just a final one of something I live by is don't read your own press clippings. Life is pretty damn tough out there. You may have been successful. I mean, Ted, you gave me a pretty lofty introduction here. I would say, in all humility, I didn't do this by myself. I had a lot of people helping me along the way. I was blessed in many ways. I don't know how that happens. And so, don't let your ego get in the way of where you're going. So that's pretty much the Sloan story. And I would just say, when you go home tonight and your spouse or your significant other says, well, what did you talk about today? And if you just say, oh, we just did a lot of toilet talk, and if she says back to you, so what else is new? then you know you're in trouble. So thank you very much.